furthest away from us, I saw what I instantly took to be Francis Bacon, because he looked like his triptychs. And I said to Serge, that's Francis Bacon. He said, no, it's not. So I said, for once I may be right. And he gave me, I think it was a 100-franc note. And Serge did. And then Papi, my father, gave me a humble piece of his diary just to go and ask for an autograph. So I went up to Francis Bacon's table and I said, are you Francis Bacon? To which he said, yes. And I said, could you do these autographs for my father and for Serge Gainsbourg, who's over there? And he said, well, he'd never done an autograph on a sort of pound note, on a franc note, ever in his life. And then there was an awful silence whilst I was handing over a piece of paper for my father. And I said, might you be having an exhibition? I mean, anywhere. I live in the Rue de Verneuil, and maybe you've got an expo somewhere in the quartier. And I waffled on about that I'd seen a little art gallery just near Rue de Verneuil, and perhaps it's not too far from that. And in the end I said, well, where is it? Where is your expo? And he said, Le Grand Palais. What a darling he was.
What do you feel about his work, yourself, your personal view of his work?
For me, he stands alone. And I didn't know much about painting. I did know about Francis Bacon, but I didn't know, I hadn't have any qualifications to talk about paintings. And Serge said I could never really be up to his standard because I hadn't been to the Beaux-Arts. So he said, yours will only be instinct. It won't be thinking things out. So for instinct, I wasn't doing too badly because Francis Bacon seemed to be very, very evident. Freud would also become of a great excellence. But have a Bacon, I would. Well, I got a print. It's over my bed. Everyone said that it would turn people off a bit, but I thought it might turn them on. I kept it there, and he just stood out amongst because it was a new way of doing everything. It was doing movement in painting. It was doing screams like the Pope, where I realised that I'd just been born when he did the Pope. So how extraordinary that he was already at it, that he'd already, from a photograph, I think it was a photograph of Velasquez's Pope, and he'd made that extraordinary scream, which is apparently what all artists try to get to, is the scream. And in that case, he got it. And then one would go back to Velasquez and painters, well, all the painters Serge loved. Velasquez, Goya, and in my case, rather conventional, but Vuillard and Bonnard. But for Serge, I think it was Goya, Rembrandt, and Bacon.
For the song Kiss Me Hardy, do you know why Serge wrote that?
Well, Serge was very enamoured with all of Francis Bacon's work, and the very few interviews that were done with him. I think there were a couple, and they were printed in a book that I gave him. And when he went off to do his disc in Jamaica, he put in the words about Francis Bacon on Kiss Me Hardy, because I told him that in the Battle of Trafalgar, when Nelson was dying, he says, "Kiss me hardy," were his last words. Serge couldn't get over it, the beauty of the act of the words. I think at one time people tried to pretend that he'd said "Kismet Hardy," so that it didn't look homosexual in any way. But to want Hardy's kiss anyway before you die was such a beautiful thing. And so he used it, Kiss Me Hardy. That was where the title came, and he would be the Francis Bacon. In 1971, or was it 1972, 73, I don't know. It was probably around the time of the exhibition in the Grand Palais. I'd like to think that it was earlier. It might have been earlier. There was one painting out of a triptych, so it was less expensive, but it was Bacon. And I nearly got it for Serge because it looked like his self-portraits. In fact, as he moves, he's very like Serge, who is, you know, he would have been a wonderful model. Can you imagine Serge by Francis Bacon? It would have been just the most wonderful thing. They were made for each other. Yeah. I think all artists love Paris, whether it's Beckett, Bacon. They usually have a fondness and a desire to... Well, Beckett used to write in French, which was even more extraordinary. But I don't know, you always think of Paris and artists.
If you had to sum up, what would you say is the essence of Serge Gainsbourg and his legacy, not just in music, but as a cultural touchstone?
I think what no one's ever done better than him, and probably because he was ahead of his time, and he wrote also for everybody else, for Bardot, for Catherine Deneuve, for everyone. But it was also his look and his way of being, his impertinence, and yet his great romanticism meant that he was like a sort of eternal adolescent. And a way of being that means that even people, when they have their slight beards nowadays, a sort of 3-day-old beard and jeans and white tennis shoes, it was he who started it.
You're talking about the fashionable stubble that almost every man is wearing these days. That's a really funny, interesting reference. But look, you just mentioned Je t'aime moi non plus, you mentioned Brigitte Bardot. And it shocked a lot of people at the time with all the breathiness and the whole sort of, you know, climactic quality of it. Tell me about how it came to you, because he did write that for Brigitte Bardot, who at the time was the major French actress.
Well, he not only wrote it for Brigitte Bardot, but he recorded it with her. And in the recording studio, there were photos that got published, and Gunter Sachs, to whom she was married, made it so that she would ask Serge to stop it, for it not to come out. So he had it in a drawer. A year later, he came across me because we did a film together, Slogan. He was a gentleman, but he couldn't quite resist showing me what he'd got in his drawer and making me listen to Je t'aime moi non plus with Bardot, which was incredibly sexy. And so he said, do you want to sing it? And as I was madly in love with him, I said, well, of course, because I didn't want anybody else to be singing it with it in a sort of a recording studio the size of a wardrobe. So I said, yes, of course.